Hello and welcome to Talk Truth. My name is Corey Huntsberger. I have my father, Allan Huntsberger, in the studio. And Dad, we're going to start off with our foundational verse because we're going to need it. The earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord. For he laid its foundation on the seas and established it on the rivers. Psalm 24, 1 and 2. For those that watch this program every single day, you can kind of like bypass that little segment of us reading the verse. But for those who are really understanding what's going on in the world, you say it along with us because you got to have those words in your mind and in your heart, right, Dad?
You do. You know, to me, what those verses say is God sees beyond time. He sees life step by step, or we see life step by step, but God sees the whole story. I mean, before David picked up a stone, God had already written his triumph. And that's, you know, I've been doing this 1 Samuel 16 because it reminds us that the Lord sees the heart. Jesus said in Revelation, don't be afraid. I am the first and the last. So I think today you need to remember God is ahead of you. Your ending is already secure in him.
Wow. Man, you are just getting some fire shots in there, aren't you? Just taking the devil to the groin, man. Good for you. Really appreciate it. I'm excited about our guest because he also. Oh, go ahead.
Well, before we begin today's program, I want to speak to those who have agonized over not being able to have a child. Something I said in a recent broadcast may have added to their pain. And for that, I sincerely apologize. It was never my intention to make light of your heartache or to suggest your faith was lacking. You are deeply loved by God and valued in his family. Please continue to pray for us, that our words will always carry truth with compassion, and that Christ will be glorified in every program. Thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing the program. Thank you for your support. We're humbled by it every day. And what we want you to know is what I say at the last of every program. We love you. And we do.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I think sometimes, you know, we've got the lights and the cameras and, you know, so much going on. Sometimes we say something that could come across the wrong way, right?
Yeah, sometimes my mouth is engaged without my brain.
I know, and words matter. But I know your heart. I know you mean well, but I appreciate you saying that. Let's get on to our guest. We have Mr. Leighton Grey on. Leighton, welcome to the show.
Oh, yeah, it's great to be on. That's one of the most sincere apologies I've ever heard. It reminds me of a line from Shakespeare, which reads, "Prick me, do I not bleed?" Which is to say, you know, I'm human. I made a mistake. And then from John Donne, the famous Christian English poet who wrote, "To err is human, to forgive divine." And I think that's a really great verse because forgiveness comes from the divine. And that's exactly what you were saying, Allan. And Allan, before we get going, I have a theological question for you. I've been listening to, in my daily devotionals, I've been listening to the late Reverend Jerry Falwell. And he was talking about Psalms 22, 23, and 24. And of course, 24 is your sort of founding verse that you open every show with. And Dr. Falwell said something that really poked me in the brain, but he didn't explain fully what he meant. He said that Psalms 22 and 23, 23 being probably the most quoted, most famous verse in the Bible, and 24 are meant to be read together. He said that, but he didn't explain why. Can you explain, first of all, do you agree with that? Is that true? And if it is true, why is that true?
Well, Psalm 22, for example, is a prophetic psalm, basically describing Jesus. I mean, it's talking about Jesus completely. And then it goes into Jesus as the great shepherd, right? And then finally it goes into Jesus and God as, you know, watching or, you know, has planned out this world from the very beginning. So it's beautiful. And he's absolutely right. I mean, we focus in on one verse because of timing. And
Right.
and I agree with you. Psalm 22 and 23 and 24 do belong together. And by the way,
Okay.
I met personally Dr. Falwell.
Really?
And I can tell you, he gave me 15 minutes to encourage me to fight for Christian radio in this country. And then the next year at the National Religious Broadcasters, I saw him coming down the hallway again with an entourage that he had with him. And I'm kind of the little, pipsqueak guy from Canada on the side. And, I thought I would just kind of mildly say hi and thinking that he wouldn't even remember me. He walked up to me and shook my hand, and he knew my name.
Wow.
And I was humbled. I couldn't believe it. But that's the kind of intellect that Dr. Falwell had, let alone his faith.
Well, thank you for that explanation and also for that wonderful story about him. That's a great way to start the program. What do you guys want to talk about today?
Well, it's funny Allan brought up radio because that's kind of what we want to talk about again. And you know how radio has been a huge part of Allan's life. Allan, I'm going to give you like 30 seconds to talk about like a little bit for those that don't know, because we have new viewers every single day, about the fight that you've had for Christian radio in Canada. Why don't you go in that, and then we'll go into kind of what's happened recently.
Well, back in 1978, I believe that God asked me to start a full-time gospel music FM radio station in the city of Calgary. And of course, I said, sure. And I had been on radio in the States when I was a youth pastor, having a couple of programs. So I immediately dug into it. And to my shock and horror, I found out that radio in Canada was illegal since 1921. So nobody
Christian radio.
wanted Christian radio. Nobody wanted to, nobody was allowed to own a Christian radio station in Canada since 1921, and nor television. And in 1978, God gave me this vision, and it took me 15 years to get the law changed. And in July of 1993, the law was changed. And in Easter Sunday, 1994, we started the first Christian radio station in Edmonton, Alberta.
Right.
Wow. Amazing.
That's kind of the start.
Wow.
And then it kind of went on fire from there. We've got radio stations, Christian radio stations across the country.
There's a book in there somewhere, Allan, that you need to write.
He's already writing another book right now.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Add that to the list, Dad. But so, and then you got out of radio, right? You got out of radio for a while, got back into discipleship, all that kind of stuff. And then fast forward, you and I have been working on Talk Truth. On Daystar Network in Canada and in the U.S. But radio is still always kind of been on your heart, right?
Yeah.
You have a first love for that thing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's like they always say I have the face for radio. So, that.
So we had the
you and me both.
So radio is the blind man's television. So if it's really done right, that's what radio is.
Well, so we recently had an opportunity to acquire a radio station of an FM, right, Dad? You want to tell that story real quick?
Yeah, well, we've been working with a FM radio station in Yorkton, Saskatchewan, and trying to help it to make sure that it stays alive. And finally, we basically then were asked, if we wanted to purchase it, and we prayed about it and felt, yeah, let's do that. So we made an agreement of purchase and everything else. And then with the CRTC, you have to get approval of the purchase. And so we filled out their application. We had some problems with agreeing with what they were asking us to do, and we said no, we would not do that, but we would be fair like we do in all of our programs. We welcome people who have the opposite thought to come on. So if somebody doesn't agree with us and they want to express their point of view, we're willing to have a fair and balanced programming. But when they start telling you who you can hire and who you can't hire, then that's a whole different situation. And anyway, after almost going into 5 months of waiting for their decision, which was, more hurtful even for people in Yorkton than it was for us. But the CRTC, not even publicly, but, kind of under the wire, turned us down to having that radio station in Yorkton.
Mm-hmm. And the decision came, and Leighton Grey, by the way, everybody, is our lawyer. And we had him read this decision because it's long and it's, very, what do you, lawyerese, you know what I mean? And so you kind of don't there are parts in it I definitely understood. They were very, very clear on what they were trying to communicate. But Leighton, we're going to hand it over to you now and get your thoughts when we sent you the decision, or you read the decision for the very first time. What were your thoughts about the whole thing? Well,
it's interesting. It fits in with what we have to recognize is the ongoing persecution of Christianity in the Western world. I was watching an old movie last night called The Hiding Place. You're probably familiar with it. It just tells a story of the Ten Boom family that lived in Holland. And I didn't realize this, but one of the first things the Nazis did when they came into an occupied country such as Holland is they banned any meetings, so you could not have prayer meetings or church services, but they also went around and they collected everyone's radio. And here what the CRTC is doing effectively is they're going one step further. They're not collecting the radios. They have control over the airwaves. They say that the government of Canada controls the airwaves. Well, that conflicts with the founding verse of your show, doesn't it? That, everything on earth and everything in it belongs to the Lord, including the airwaves. And that's the point that you gentlemen are trying to make. But this, as in terms of Canadian law and liberties and religious freedom, is a very, very dangerous decision. And it works on a number of levels. In the first place, what the CRTC is saying is, they're not saying, we have a problem with Christian radio. They do, but they don't have the courage to say that. What they're saying instead is, procedurally, you have to fit within our woke parameters, and otherwise you don't get a license. And that's problem number one. They're using legal procedure and due process against you. And this is bureaucratically, this is what happens sometimes when you're dealing with regulatory boards that are given enormous power. So that's problem number one, because let's face it, that stinks. Anybody watching this or listening to this, says, well, there's a real problem with that, because they don't get to the heart of the matter. They don't even you don't get a fair hearing. They just knocked you out at the start because they've set these woke parameters, diversity, inclusion, equity, critical race theory. You have to have a certain amount of, indigenous program, et cetera, et cetera. Otherwise, you don't get the license. That's problem number one. Here's problem number two. This has been a Christian radio station for, I understand, about 3 decades. There's a contract. There was a deal between Talk Truth, you gentlemen, and the owners. Well, the CRTC is stepping in. They're saying, well, this contract, which is supposed to be protected under Canadian law, there's a series of Supreme Court of Canada decisions on this. That contract is supposed to have some sanctity in terms of two parties entering into an agreement and an exchange of obligations and duties and benefits. And CRTC is coming in. They're frustrating that contract. They're saying, you know what, these people who own this radio station, you can never sell to anyone who's going to continue the tradition of Christian programming. And I believe that that's by design. I think they're making that very clear. On a deeper level, here's the problem. If they can never sell to anyone who's going to continue Christian programming, isn't that going to lead to the extinction of Christian programming? And if that is the design, I think that's evil. Frankly, that's not a legal opinion. That's my opinion, as a Bible thumping lawyer. But I think the objective, but it is very consistent with what we've seen from all levels of government, especially the federal government in this country. But on the third level, this is why this is troubling. In the letter, the CRTC tells you that they're essentially violating your right of religious expression. Right? They're violating that. Then they know they are. But then what they do is they say, oh, and by the way, the federal government has granted to us the authority to review our own charter violation. And so they look at Section 1, which is the saving provision, about whether or not what they've done is a reasonable limit upon your religious freedom. And they say, well, we've reviewed our own decision, which violates your rights, and we're confident that it's okay. So this is really, really troubling because, of course, it essentially amounts to this bureaucratic board. These people, no one elected them. They've been handpicked. They're sort of woke apparatchiks. But they're deciding all of these things and essentially saying that, according to federal law, our decisions are not reviewable by an independent party. So this is a very, very troubling decision all around, especially for people who want to continue the tradition of Christian broadcasting that has deep roots in places like Alberta and Saskatchewan. And then, as Allan has described, he worked very hard to revive and restore. But now what's happening is, through this bureaucracy, working behind the scenes, through regulations, the CRTC is undoing all of that work and really trying to eradicate Christian broadcasting in this country. This is part of a broader pattern that we're seeing. Everybody knows that in Canada we've had hundreds of churches burned without any real consequences. Many churches in Canada are suffering from changes to charitable rules under the Income Tax Act, which are threatening to remove charitable status for churches, which is going to make many churches financially unviable. That's by design. And just the other day, Donald Trump in the United States gave a speech at the Museum of the Bible in the U.S., which I didn't even know existed. Praise God, there is such a place. I have to go visit there. But he recognized that Christianity is under attack in the West. And he made some very strong statements that he was going to do something about it. He vowed to protect prayer in public schools with new Department of Education guidance. And so there is hope on the horizon. But I think this decision, I mentioned these other things to put this into context, that this is part of a broader pattern. And Christians out there need to be aware. And, to some degree, we need to be vigilant. And I'll just finish off with a quotation. You guys know how I love quotations, but the theologian, the late J.C. Ryle, said this. He said, true Christianity will cost a man the favor of the world. He must be content to be thought ill of by man if he pleases God. He must count it no strange thing to be mocked. He must count it no strange thing to be mocked, ridiculed, slandered, persecuted, and even hated. And unfortunately, that is the lot of Christians, of many Christians in Canada and the United States and throughout the West today. And coming back to my earlier point about the Nazis, that isn't unique. The Soviets did the same thing when they lowered the Iron Curtain. Christianity has always been seen as the major enemy of truth and of freedom and of justice and of hope. And so when you are faced with one of the main tools of an oppressor, of an oppressive society, of an oppressive regime, is to stamp out Christianity, because that is the main enemy of evil. And unfortunately, one of the ways that this is done is through, bureaucratic operations that will stamp out the ability to send this message of inspiration and hope and love to people through radio waves, through television, through the internet, and through meeting together and congregating as we are called to do. So unfortunately, this is a very troubling decision. I'm looking forward to finding out what instructions you gentlemen are going to give me about the next phase of things. But yeah, I think it's important to make people aware that this type of thing is going on in our country, because I think many people would be shocked and appalled by what's happening.
I think, in the 15 years that I was fighting for Christian radio, one of the things that the CRTC really hammered away was that, the Broadcasting Act said that you had to be fair and balanced in matters of public concern. And what they drew as a conclusion is that because of my Christian faith, I couldn't be fair and balanced. In other words, if there was a discussion about abortion or pro-life, I would obviously stick with the pro-life and not bring up abortion. So what they're saying is, because you're a Christian, you can't be balanced. If you're a non-Christian, you're balanced. And I just refuse to believe that and say, no, I can be balanced. In other words, I welcome somebody that has an opposing view of what either my guest on the show has or even myself. Let's open up and let's discuss it. We do that in this program all the time. That if somebody is, being attacked by somebody else, we invite that somebody else that, we welcome you to come on and express your point of view and give us a call. So that's important. The other thing is there repeatedly factors about Indigenous. Do they not know that our very lawyer here, Leighton Grey,
I've got the card.
Is a Canadian-born Indian from what's your tribe that you're from?
They're from Carry the Kettle at St. Louis, Saskatchewan. Yeah,
there you go.
We're Canadian Sioux, essentially in Assiniboine. You raise a great point, Allan, about the presumed. And this is one of the swords that's always waved around by government, by the left, that Christianity is intolerant. In fact, historically, the exact opposite is true. The most tolerant societies, almost to a fault, are Christian societies because, of course, we live by the Lord's second commandment, which is to love our neighbor. And part of loving our neighbor is we have to even pray for them. We have to even pray for our enemies. And what's interesting is when you look at the truth about it, it's atheistic societies which are the least tolerant. They are the ones who suppress dissent and opinion and fairness. They're opposed to all fairness. There's only one opinion in such societies. And, Christopher Hitchens, who's one of the world's most famous atheistic thinkers, recently was on a podcast, and he said he's not a Christian, but he is a cultural Christian because he understands that he wants to live as an atheist. He wants to live in a culturally Christian society because it's only in such a society, historically, it's a proven fact, that where his atheism can be tolerated, where his views can be tolerated, where he knows that his rights will be protected, where he's going to have freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom to congregate, freedom to form associations with others, and to have opinions that might be offensive to others. So it's actually that sword that's waved is actually it's a falsity, isn't it? The truth of Christianity is quite the opposite.
Well, their DEI includes everybody but Christians.
Yeah. It's a cult. It's a false religion. It's a false Christianity. What it does is it tries to distill out the parts of Christianity that it likes, but then it takes God out of the equation. And of course, that's no Christianity at all. That's a bastard child of liberalism. And that's what we're living through. We're living through this woke cult that is attempting to replace Christianity. It's saying that Christianity has to be removed because it's intolerant, which is a lie. The truth is that it's the woke cult that is intolerant. It won't even tolerate the existence of Christianity. That not to put too fine a point on it, but we're fighting this everywhere. We particularly see it at times like Christmas and Easter, in situations where a certain flag is being flown, in our parliament buildings and our city halls. Whereas those places would never fly the Christian flag. There is a Christian flag, by the way, folks. You can look it up, Google it.
I think what is crazy is we respect them enough, the CRTC, we respect them enough to tell them the truth. We respect them enough to come and say, you know what, we can't agree to that, but here's what we can agree to. We're going to love our neighbors. We're going to pray for our enemies. We're going to be fair and balanced program. We went back to them and said, your DEI is not something we can agree to because of our Christian beliefs and faith, but we're gonna one up you. We're gonna 10x you on how much more love and inclusion we're gonna have. Because I feel like, and I've said it before, God has a DEI program, and it's way better than what the world could ever offer, and it's genuine. A lot of people know like you're forced to do this DEI. It's not genuine. You know what I mean? You just do it because you're forced to do it. And we could have done that. We could have lied and said, we agree to your terms and never done it. We don't want to be that way. We want to be truthful. We want to be honest. And so we came and gave them an alternative, and obviously they weren't pleased about it. But we appreciate you, Leighton, that you're able to read it, help us understand it. I threw it through Chat GPT too. It's like, what are they saying? You know what I mean? Chat's like, you know what I mean? They're not really fond of you right now, basically.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the technique that these bureaucrats use. Is they use sort of obfuscation of language, you know.
Yeah.
And of course, when you read, if you want to read the most direct language, read the Gospels the way Christ speaks. There's no obfuscation there. Read the Sermon on the Mount.
Right.
Some of those parables are head scratchers. Right. But I mean, it's God talking. You're supposed to stretch.
It's head scratching for a purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's
when Jesus, most of the time when Jesus is talking, I mean, he's the most coherent philosopher that ever lived. He had the advantage of being the Son of God, however.
Yeah,
there's a big advantage.
Here's what Allan and I know. We have done everything God has asked us to do to this point of time right now. So everything that has happened, all the decisions that have been made, the letters that have been written, it is within God's will. Where does this go in the future? I'm not 100% positive. Those are conversations we're going to be talking about, what our options are and alternatives that we can work on. But I am here to say this. Allan's been a fighter for his whole life, and he's not going to let it go. Right, Dad?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Leighton, we really
soldier.
Yes.
Yeah. The one thing that I know is the battle is the Lord's.
Yes.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you, Leighton. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll definitely have you back.
Great. It's my pleasure. God bless.
Well, it's great having Leighton on. And that's kind of a little bit of an update of one of the many things you and I are battling on the home front here, right?
Yes, sir.
God's not finished with us yet. You want to help support our mission, keep this kind of conversation in truth on the air. We are viewer supported. We don't take government funds or special interest groups or lobbyists groups. No, it's only because of the generosity of those who watch this show that we're able to continue to bring the truth across our country. You can go to our website, gotalktruth.com, click on donate. That way you can give digitally if you prefer it that way. If you want to do it through the mail, you can. You can make your gift payable to Heritage Christian Ministries Association and send it to 246 Stewart Green, Southwest, Suite 3260, Calgary, Alberta, T3H3C8. And if you'd like prayer, you can call our prayer line 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Call our toll-free number 1-800-915-0056, and someone from our prayer team will cover you in prayer. All right, Dad, we're out of time. We'll see you guys later.
Love you.